Brazil's economic malaise is no laughing matter, and one man not mincing words is former central bank director Alexandre Schwartzman. We spoke in his Sao Paulo offices.
Well, we've been at Crossroads for as long as I can remember, and sometimes we have taken the right path, sometimes we haven't been so lucky. And I think we are at one point like that right now. I mean, there are clear issues that have been present for quite some time in Brazil. Most of them related to the size of the government, government spending, taxation, and so on, which to some extent will conveniently push it down the rug, among other things because commodity prices helped us and we managed to maintain relatively strong growth. But as the tide has moved it up, actually the tide has moved it down and has exposed quite a few of Brazilian flaws, there are issues that at this point we have to address. That is, what are we going to do with Social Security? How are we going to live with a tax burden that is the highest within emerging markets? How can we live with a tax system that is one of the most complex in the world? And how do we rethink the relationship between the government and society, the government and the economy? So plenty of questions that have to be addressed. And the difficult point that is right now is precisely that it's clear that society and Congress have not found the answers to that. And due to Brazilian peculiarities in the political system, there will be no answers at the very least until we have a new election, which is scheduled only to take place 3 years from now. So we're talking about definitely not only a moment in which we have to make decisions, but more importantly, even though we have to make them, it's clear that we do not have the conditions to make any decision at this point.
Now, Brazil was world famous in the first decade of the 21st century for the tremendous economic momentum. And it seemed like there could have been an opportunity to make some of the reforms that you talked about.
Yeah.
Why did those reforms not happen, and do you think that opportunity was missed?
Well, usually it's very hard to convince people that you have to fix the roof while it's not raining. They see no need to do this. But yeah, once Lula came into power back in 2003, he was actually, to some extent, forced into continue the reform process that had been going with its ups and downs since the beginning of the 90s. So he came into power under deep suspicion, and therefore he had to prove himself a responsible manager. And as such, he has not only taken care of macroeconomic variables and interest rates and fiscal developments, but essentially has actually went head on some reforms. But to the extent that the pressure came down as Lula proved himself responsible, commodity prices start to increase in terms of trade moving in our favor, I think that the sense of urgency had gone. The problems were still there. We knew it, and we knew that the way that Social Security is set up in Brazil, it's unsustainable. But people figure, oh, no, what? Tax collection is going up. It's going up, even though we are not hiking taxes. Just the fact that the economy is growing, and a fraction of the economy that was previously in the shadows is coming out to light, and therefore they are paying more taxes. We thought that we could afford to postpone addressing these issues for a longer time. When it became clear that we could no longer do it, we were at the verge of another election. So it was pretty clear that in 2013, 2014, there were years in which no unpopular measures would be taken. So I think it was a mixture of some complacency that built up during the growth years, a sense that we could address these issues later on. There were no urgency in addressing them.
How much of this would you say was a bad gamble on commodity prices remaining strong?
Oh, pretty much all of it. We really took it as if commodity prices would remain high forever, and Brazil could benefit from them. And we essentially left whatever we had to do in terms of domestic reforms for some other government, some other day. We clearly were not terribly concerned about this. With one important caveat, at least when it comes to macroeconomic policy, there were signs of slowdown in Brazil coming even before commodity prices actually collapsed. Growth, which had been strong up to 2010, slowed down significantly from 2011 onwards, and this was seen essentially as an issue of lack of demand. So what we saw is a government that actually undertook very strong measures towards boosting up demand, so increasing spending to some extent, granting tax breaks for some specific sectors, lowering interest rates, increasing significantly the amount of credit through the public banks, which was financed out of government debt issuance, so it was just another dimension of fiscal policy. So we've seen a government that was too keen in boosting demand when the economy was actually slowing down because of supply constraints, and essentially create enormous imbalances in terms of inflation, in terms of fiscal accounts, in terms of the balance of payments. So in addition of not addressing reforms, we essentially undertook a series of macroeconomic measures that were based on a wrong diagnosis of why the country was slowing down, which only made the problem worse in terms of all these things, fiscal accounts, inflation, and the balance of payments. So when the day of reckoning came, we were really bad prepared to do it, and it came much earlier than most people would think.
How bad is this economic situation?
It's really bad. Look, we are about to see how strong was the fall in GDP last year. But the consensus was that GDP possibly fell on the vicinity of 4% last year. We have never seen Brazilian GDP collapsing by something like 3%. Well, now we're talking about a GDP contraction around 4%. Not only that, we are probably facing another year of a GDP contraction around 4% as well. So when we look back into Brazilian history, we do not see such a strong decline in terms of GDP anywhere. There are talks once more about, because of poor GDP growth and the inability of the government to put its accounts in order, the spectrum of debt default is back. It's not something that we really thought possible. I honestly still don't think it's possible, but if there is not an explicit default in the sense the government saying, oh, look, I'm not going to pay you anything, the possibility of a disguised default through higher inflation, and is a very concrete possibility. So yes, it is pretty bad. It's not beyond the means of repairing, but we need to do something about it. It's not coming out of thin air. Gravity is not taking care of it for us. We have to act. And the point is, we have not been able to muster the political forces to do what is needed at this point.
We see a situation that's bad and seems to require reform.
Mm-hmm.
Many countries face that problem.
Mm-hmm.
But what could aggravate that is it seems like a really difficult time to get any sort of political action in Brazil, especially on the economic front. What are the political issues that are preventing economic action or policy action?
Quite a few of them. This is a government that has maintained itself in power, especially during the 2014 campaign, essentially stating that there was nothing wrong with the country, right? Any difficulties had to do with a less favorable external scenario, but essentially that things were okay, and we could elect the president. She would keep the same kind of policies because they're working just fine. But once she was elected, right there, it was pretty clear that it was not the case. It's anecdotal, but anyway, a couple of days after the election, the central bank started hiking interest rates again. About 1 month or a little more than 1 month after she was elected, it was announced that the finance minister would depart, but she announced that a new finance minister, which was coming from one of the largest banks in the country. Mind you, that during the campaign, right, the Workers' Party, the President's Party, actually portrayed those who were in favor of central bank autonomy as basically tending to to the requirements of bankers who would steal the food out of the table of poor people. There were TV ads stating precisely that, and the food was disappearing, taken away by greedy bankers. And you know what? She comes and puts a Bradesco banker in the central position as the finance minister. So it was pretty clear that they have to make a turnaround in terms of economic policy, but how do you sell it to the population? How can you tell the population that you were saying essentially this, you're moving in this direction, when you're elected, you move to the opposite direction? I'm not saying that, politicians can't lie. Of course, right? This is what they do, right? And they do it anywhere. But there are limits that you can do. So, and people felt betrayed. It came to a point in which it was clear that because of this long-term trend of fragmentation, plus the difficulties in implementing a policy that is precisely the opposite of what you have done, plus the natural problems of a coalition in Congress, came to a point in which it was clear that the government cannot address this issue. So we need to make a fiscal adjustment, we need to reduce spending, and it's something that we have known for a long time. The federal government can move around something like 10% of its spending. 90% of it is mandated by laws, by the Constitution itself. So the room for adjustment is minimal. So you need Congress essentially to create additional room for expenditure cutting, and you cannot do it. And I think this is the nut of the question, is the fact that we all know it. We know that we need reforms for long-term growth. We need reforms to address the fiscal issue, and this government cannot do it.
What do you think would be more chaotic or damaging for the Brazilian economy, to muddle through till 2018 and a new election, or to pursue this impeachment?
Unless it's really proven that somehow the president herself was involved into something illegal, I think we should not pursue the impeachment process. Having said that, it could be the case, I don't know, if we impeach the president, it will remove some of the obstacles that are currently in place. I strongly doubt that, because when it comes to of course, the president is deeply incompetent. She's not prepared. She was bankrupt trying to run a $2 store. So this is the kind of quality. She doesn't have any grasp of what is going on the economic side. She can barely, articulate two thoughts together, and we see when she speaks up, especially when she's improvising, that, horrible things come out. So she's clearly not intellectually prepared to run the country. And most of all, she's not politically prepared to run the country. She dislikes politicians, she dislikes the very idea of talking to them, so she trampled over them when she was on the high. So they're essentially paying her back. So getting rid of an incompetent person, yeah, it's great, but it doesn't address the other issue. I think only a person that would be elected on the back of something, saying something like, I have nothing to offer you but blood, sweat, and tears, would be able to really address these issues. Whoever comes into power promising heaven and delivering hell will be facing the same kind of situation that the current president is facing. So I don't think that the impeachment or getting rid of the president will necessarily solve our problems. I think that we have to insist in the democratic way, and I think the democratic way is for someone to come forward and say, look, there is a way out of this mess, but it's going to be a tricky way. We are going to suffer a lot, but believe me, eventually I'll deliver you to the promised land, but not before 40 years in the desert. Well, it worked with Moses, right? Why not with someone else?
Well, there you have it. I think this was the cutting-edge analysis we were hoping for, and end with Moses,
Yeah.
and hopefully it takes less than 40 years to get
Yeah,
out of
hopefully.
it. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.